Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. My name is Bernadette Desir, and I'm your host. And joining me today is Heidi Johnson. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Happy to have you. So, Heidi, can you tell us where you're tuning in from?
I am based in the Denver metro area, so more in the suburbs, but pretty close to the city.
Oh, nice. You like the city or the suburb?
I would say I prefer the suburbs, especially having a child. The city can be a little much at times, but it is a fun place to go visit. We have so many great restaurants in Denver, and it's becoming quite the scene. So it's fun to visit, not some place I'd want to live, though, permanently.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to have both. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, Heidi, can you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. As far as what I do, I have really, I would say, dedicated my life's work, my education, profession to global development. I work for two organizations right now, one of which establishes holistic community wide clean water systems, predominantly in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Mhm.
So I work for them. I also serve as executive director of an organization that is working to provide rural healthcare solutions in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly as it relates to high neonatal or newborn mortality rates, as well as high maternal mortality rates. And so
Mhm.
we're working to provide solutions with teams, of course, on the ground that are operating these programs.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Yeah, you were telling me before we started recording that you're doing some work in Haiti. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and so that's through the organization I work for, Healing Waters International. We have a dedicated team on the ground. They're Haitian nationals, and so they live born and raised in Haiti. They are currently establishing and building programs and water projects along the border of the DR. And so I'm sure you know current events in Haiti are making it so that there's a lot of unrest in the country. And so our team is being very savvy in how they navigate the country, but they're still operating despite all of the things that are going on and working to bring clean water to communities that don't have it.
I love that. Yeah, for those who
Yeah.
don't know, I'm from Haiti, and now you know. Yeah, yeah. So I want to thank you, Heidi, for the work that you're doing and your team. And you're right, there's quite a bit of unrest there. It's nothing like
Yeah.
it is when I left Haiti when I was preteen. It's
Yeah.
bad. It's bad. And I'm just
Yeah.
grateful that you can reach Haitians from where you are and also have Haitians on the ground helping
Mhm.
where it's needed the most. Tell
Yeah.
me more of your story. Take us way back. What was it like growing up? And
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I think there's a lot of people that are like, well, how did you get into this work? Being in global development is a unique job. It's not something that you see that's super widespread as far as professions go. And I would say, especially being in landlocked Colorado, my travel experience when I was younger was very limited. My parents typically took me to, places that they could drive to. So I didn't really experience anywhere outside of the United States truly until I was probably 18 years old. And so, there was a piece of me, I would say, as a young girl that would look at maps and read about these foreign places and just dream of going to places outside of the United States. And so I always had kind of this wanderlust of wanting to experience exotic places. My grandma was an avid traveler, and she would go to some of the most exotic places around the world, and she'd always bring me back a souvenir. And I think that that was maybe one of the impetuses for the work that I did, because it just piqued my curiosity.
Mhm.
But so that I think is related to me just having a curiosity about travel. But I would say, there's you get into the work of global development um, because you have a heart for wanting to make the world a better place. And so that's something you don't get into this work to become wealthy or rich or anything like that. And so I think that there were several events that happened to me early on in my life that really, I think, and my mom is probably one of the most empathetic people that I know. So I had that as a foundation, but there were things that happened in my life that I would say further encouraged me to get into this work.
Mm.
So when I was 15 years old, I was attending Columbine High School, um, a school here in Littleton, Colorado, pretty mid-sized town, I would say. I would also say it was known for being a very safe town. There wasn't a lot of activity that would
Mm.
happen, or things that you'd maybe be worried about living in Littleton. But I was a sophomore in high school and was uh, going to my classes just like every other student. And one day decided to go to the library to work on my homework. And about, I would say, midway into, maybe 10 minutes into the period, I started hearing loud bangs going off right outside of the library where I was at.
Mm.
And at first, really didn't think anything of it. Was convinced that maybe it was a high school senior prank, or that maybe they were doing construction.
Mhm.
It didn't strike me as being anything um, concerning in any way, shape, or form.
Mm.
Shortly after the bangs started going off, one of the teachers came running into the library. I saw her run in through the entrance, and she was incredibly frantic. You know, face was pale. She was like moving her arms up and down and just yelling at us. A kid has been shot. A kid has been shot. Get under your tables.
Oh.
And so I watched this teacher as I kind of in a very confused state got under my table,
Mhm.
still not really sure what was happening, so incredibly disoriented, confused. But I saw her run behind the desk. Like there was like this big desk at the front of the library. I see her run behind it, grab a phone, get on the phone with 911 and say, I'm here at Columbine High School. There's been a shooting. A kid has been shot. We need you to get here right away.
Mhm.
And so still having, I mean, like in that phase, in that state, you don't know what's happening. And so you're just trying to piece together. You're in a state of shock and a state of disbelief. But my heart's pounding very fast. Thoughts are racing. I'm trying to brace and figure out what's actually happening. And from where I was positioned, I was mentioned I was at a table in the library. I had all the chairs of that table just pulled in tight around my body. But from where I was sitting, I could see the entrance and exit of the library. Um,
Mhm.
and what began to happen is what I discovered later is pipe bombs were going off. And so the library was just filling with smoke. And that triggered the fire alarm. And so the lights went off. The library was, like I said, filled with smoke. Alarms were going off. It was just a very chaotic scene. And I remember looking at the entrance of the library, and I saw these almost two shadow like figures come walking in. And from what I saw, they were wearing trench coats, long jackets One of them had gun artillery strapped around his shoulder. They were both carrying shotguns, and they came in very forcefully and basically said, "Everybody get ready to die." From that point, I just heard them shooting across the library. And so the library was separated into three sections by books. And so at first, I couldn't see what was happening. They were in the first section, and there was a whole bookshelf that was keeping me from seeing anything. So I didn't know what was happening, but I could hear it. And so I would hear them pull the trigger. I'd hear students scream. I would hear them scream things like, "I can't believe you just shot him. You just shot him. I can't believe it." And so I was hearing all of that take place. They eventually make their way over to my section of the library, where through the chairs of my table, I can see their boots. That's how close they were to me. And there were computer cubbies in front of me, and they put their gun under the computer cubby and pulled the trigger. And I could see a student kind of just slump over as they pulled the trigger. They shot all across my section. I heard them kill several students. And yeah, basically, at one point, I remember them coming over to my table, looking under my table, and for whatever reason, leaving. So there's a lot more to my story as it relates to that. I don't need to go into all of the detail, but I will say that experiencing a trauma that is so acute, that is so life altering and life changing, there was a lot of course, healing that I had to do with that. But I would say that part of what happened in the midst of healing from that trauma is I developed a heart, like it's almost like it strips you down to absolute survival. And so I was having experienced that, and then learning about what people go through around the world where maybe they don't have um, the wealth that the United States has. They don't have the infrastructure of a developed country, and what that can lead to as far as insecurity, what that can lead to as far as food security, and the impacts of that on daily life, I think made me resonate with people across the world in that way, because I had experienced what survival feels like. And I feel selfishly, for me to provide programs around the world that help in that way is me almost reclaiming my power of what was taken from me when I went through the shooting. Unselfishly, I know at some level what that's like, and don't want anyone else to experience it.
Yeah, yeah. Whew. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thank you for being so open about it. That
Mm,
is, no one deserved to go through what you went through.
mm,
It's a trauma that stays for a lifetime, if that makes sense. Even though
absolutely.
there's been lots of healing, it's not something you just
Mm,
get rid of, right?
mm.
And yeah, I honor your strength and authenticity to share. And
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, growing up in Haiti, I've seen things that a child shouldn't. Dead bodies
Yeah.
on the road, gunshots, nearly starving,
Yeah.
abuse of all kinds, right? So
Mm,
I see you. Maybe
mm,
our pain may have been different, the trauma may have been different, but
mm,
trauma is trauma. And I'm just
mm.
happy that we both, as power women, we get to put our boots on the ground and do
Yeah.
something about what we've been through. and helping them
Yeah,
get through that. Yeah.
that's so well stated. Such a, yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So what was your healing process like?
Yes, that's a
What did you
great
do?
question. Um, so I will say very nonlinear, which I would say is normal in trauma. But I would also say that back when this happened, which was in the 90s, mental health um, was not something that was prioritized, maybe at the level that it is now. And in fact, there were certain things that, at least within my faith community, were almost demonized as it relates to mental health. So things like therapy, things like medication. There
Mhm,
was a lot of emphasis placed on positive thinking, for instance, which fine, but it's very hard to do when you haven't dealt with the base level traumas that you've experienced and
mhm,
can't speak honestly and openly about those things. And so
mhm,
I had went through years post Columbine of burying my emotions, of putting up a front, of
mhm,
grinning and bearing it, white knuckling it, trying to just push through and survive. And eventually, so it happened when I mentioned it happened when I was 15 years old.
mhm,
When I turned 25, so 10 years later, I could not sustain it anymore. I just couldn't. I reached a point of no longer being able to function, um,
mhm.
just plowing through. You can only sustain that for so long.
Yeah.
And so I literally crumbled at that age and
Mhm,
um, struggled with what's happening with me. Am I going crazy? What is this? And there was such a fear because, as you mentioned before, when we were talking before you started recording, that we continue to see these things happen, especially here in the United States. And so every time that it would happen again, it was re traumatizing to me. It would be one thing if Columbine happened and then we didn't see anything happen again. But
mhm,
I remember being 25 and there was a shooting that happened not far from where I live
mhm,
again. And it was at a school in the mountains. And there was just this, it hit me like a ton of bricks, this reality check that I could go through this again, this
mhm,
awful, traumatic experience that I defined my life of before Columbine and after Columbine because of how much it impacted me and how much it changed just my base level self,
mhm,
that it could happen to me again. And that terrified me to my core, to the point of where I was almost unable to function. And so I had a choice, I believe, at that moment in time. I could essentially crawl under a rock and just become a recluse and allow myself to just live in a constant state of terror and trauma and fear. And honestly, I don't think that anybody would fault me for that. I think that I probably could do that, and people would probably have sympathy for me in doing that. But there was that piece of me that just wanted more out of life. I didn't want to just roll over. I didn't want to just um, escape. I wanted to experience life. And so I pursued, for the first time in 10 years, I pursued counseling. I pursued medication. I got on a medication, which I think was revolutionary for me, in just the way that it helped regulate my hormones and my emotions. It gave me that like almost fallback to help me work through some of that trauma. Um, so it's just been a lot of therapy.
mhm,
It's been a lot of truthfully choosing to live. And when I say that, I mean allowing myself to feel what I need to feel, to be anxious, to be traumatized, like to be authentic to what my body and my like what I'm experiencing, but
Yeah.
to not allow that to dictate what I do in life.
Mhm.
And pursuing a career in global development, there have been moments where I've traveled abroad and have not been safe, have not been in safe spaces.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I would have been able to do that had I not worked through some of these things. And it is re-traumatizing. I'm human. I am not a robot and can just set aside my trauma. It comes when it comes too. Like you're like, oh no, like you wish that you
Mhm.
can choose when to have it pop up and you can't. Like it's
Mhm.
just going to come up when it comes up. And so, um, but I will say that having really good tools in place, knowing how to deal with panic attacks when they come,
Mhm.
having a wonderful support system that I can say, hey, I'm really anxious right now. I'm struggling right now. And to not hear back, well, power through it, work through it, but just to receive empathy, understanding, and compassion. Those things have all been really essential to healing. But I would say, as you mentioned, you don't ever fully heal from this. Like, this isn't
No.
something that you check the box on and are like, okay, good, I'm done. You get better. And I think, people have asked me, like, well, do you wish that this never happened? And in some ways, absolutely. It's been
Mhm.
a lot to have to deal with, and it has forever altered who I am. But I will also say that it has changed me in profound ways that I don't think I would have the level of empathy that I have for others, or the understanding of suffering, or the understanding of survival, if I didn't go through this. And so there is certain, I mean, for lack of a better word, positives that I can take from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I see so much of myself in you, in your story. I know we
mm,
don't know each other that well, but that is the power of us
mm,
trusting and having faith and knowing that yes, we'll share our stories. It may be
yeah,
triggering, but at the end of the day, it's gonna help somebody. That's
yes.
what your story is doing
Mm,
for me, and for many other people. And that's why I have a podcast. I do
yeah,
it for no money, nothing. I just
yep,
want to hear people's stories. That's it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, as you were talking about mental health, you're looking at
mm,
a miracle, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
in Haiti, that I have
mm,
schizophrenia and PTSD
yeah,
and blah blah blah.
yeah,
It would have been
mm,
demonized, right?
yes,
And
yeah,
yeah, I'm grateful to be in a country that accept people. We have quite a
mm,
ways to go, but
sure,
um, I can freely talk about it. I don't have to be
yeah,
ashamed about it,
yes,
like I used to be. And
yes,
it's a continuous journey. And before we were doing the interview, I was looking at the 6 common survival patterns. I had
mm.
no clue what we were going to talk about. I'm going to share them if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the first one is victim. The second one is invisibility, which you're talking about, going under the rock, which I've felt
Mm,
also. And the
yeah,
third one is procrastination. We
mm,
just we want to take our time to do the healing at our own pace, even though we have to speed up if we want to cut up to our dreams and the things we want to do. And the fourth
yeah,
one I have is the chameleon mode,
mm,
where we can quickly shift
yeah,
ourselves and appearance based on the environment or circumstances or situations we're in. And the
yeah,
fifth one is the helper, which is
mm,
where I think both of us are at.
yeah, for sure.
Right? We want to help people. And
Yeah.
the last one is the lover.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's mind blowing that you brought it up, because that's what I've been looking into. And I'm doing Facebook lives on trauma.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool.
yeah,
I'm like, thank you,
yeah.
universe. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, tell me more about the name of your organization, Healing
Yeah, so
Waters.
yes. So I work for Healing Waters, and we build, it's a organization that works in WASH, it stands for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. And
Mm,
so we work in four staffed countries:
mm,
Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and Haiti, where
mhm,
we build, I would say, very comprehensive, highly engineered water solutions for remote, like very remote communities. We're building
mhm,
a water project in Guatemala, which is high up in the hills,
mm,
pumping water 2 kilometers uphill in a remote rural region. So there's not a consistent power grid. We have to use solar power to do this. We have to use comprehensive, which I won't bore you with the details, but comprehensive water solutions to pump this water uphill. But this is a community that didn't have clean water for years, and several other nonprofits came in and basically said, we can't do this. It's too resource intensive
mm,
and difficult to develop a structure or system that is going to consistently meet the needs of the community. And so I feel very fortunate to work for an organization that I feel like is providing, when we look at the hierarchy of needs, water is at the absolute base. It's like air, water, like
mm,
people need clean water. And when that is not available to them, you have consistent illness and disease and children who are regularly missing school because they're always sick, or
mm,
especially the ways that it impacts women and girls who bear the burden of having to go long distances to collect water and then purify it. Um,
mm,
I think that it's a liberating movement to be able to provide clean water to communities that truly need it. So
mm,
I feel very fortunate to be a part of that organization. I also serve as executive director for an organization called Angel Covers. I mentioned that we do rural healthcare in sub-Saharan Africa. My master's work for global development built and
mm,
established a program in rural Angola. Um, there's 7,000 newborns that die every single day, mostly from preventable causes in sub-Saharan Africa.
mm,
Maternal mortality is highest in that region as well. And so um, providing rural healthcare solutions has been just such a strong passion of mine,
mm,
especially just looking at the lives lost and lives that could be here if they just had better access to services.
mhm.
So we're working with a highly trained Kenyan physician in rural Angola. It's right on the border. The nearest hospital is about 2 hours away,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's on a good weather day. So
Mm,
if it rains, and everyone drives motos in Kenya, by and large,
mhm,
it's impossible to get to the hospital. And so if there's any type of birth complication, the chances of maternal mortality, neonatal mortality go up drastically. And
mhm.
so we provide a clinic in a strategic area where um, people need it and the community needs it, which I'm so passionate about, so proud of, and just hope to see it flourish and grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I
Yeah.
can feel the love and passion for what you do. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I hope one day I can partner with organizations like yours to be on the
Yeah.
ground, to be helping people. That's kind of where I'm
Yes.
working my way up to.
Yep.
It's going to take time, but I
Yep.
think when we have the experience, we have
Mm.
more to offer, even if we may
Yes.
not have the actual resources. Our hearts are
Yes.
there, if that makes
Yep.
sense. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And yeah, water. Hmm.
Yep.
I've experienced extreme poverty. I'm not
Mm.
rich right now. And I've
Yeah.
experienced, just getting by.
Mm.
When I try to tell people, be grateful for what you have, I think
Mm.
Westerners and other people who
Yes.
have, they get offended. They think
Mm-hmm.
that we're guilt tripping them, but they have
Yep.
no idea. I
Yeah.
used to carry water on my head, as a little girl in
Yeah.
Haiti. I used to,
Yeah.
and I used to
Yeah.
carry laundry and wash it by the river and
Yep.
take bus and take it home just to have clean
Yeah.
clothes. And
Yeah.
I see people here complaining they have dishwashers, washing machine,
Yeah,
dryers, and clean water and food that
yeah,
they can open a fridge and eat, right?
yeah,
And it's not a guilt thing. It's,
yeah.
to have a perspective and idea of what the
Hmm.
other part of the world is experiencing and just how
Yes.
people live. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's really cool that
Yeah.
you're helping doing that because I've heard so much maternal loss. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I have a sister in Haiti who lost a baby, and it
Yeah.
could have
Yeah.
been prevented
Yes.
if she was here, it would have
Yep.
been prevented. She was,
Yes.
and it was with preeclampsia.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
had preeclampsia with both of my kids,
Yes.
and I'm sitting here,
Yep.
right? And yeah,
That's, I
so
think, one of the top three killers of women is preeclampsia, um,
mhm,
hemorrhage, those things where it's preventable. It's just needing
mhm,
skilled birth attendants, basic access to healthcare, nothing super sophisticated. I mean,
mhm.
it doesn't need to be these large state-of-the-art hospitals. It
Yeah,
doesn't require a whole lot.
yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah. Do you do some work in Asia as well?
so I did in a previous position. I was actually working. So there's a lot of the sex industry in Asia, particularly where I worked, South and Southeast Asia, was very prevalent. And when you combine the sex industry with extreme poverty, you have children who are growing up in the sex industry, which I'm sure it doesn't take a lot to know that that leads to just a lot of different forms of abuse, and survival mechanisms that
Mm,
people have. And so working in places like Cambodia, Bangladesh, India, we saw um, we saw children who were growing up, while their mothers were working as sex workers. And of course, I have all the compassion in my heart for sex workers. I think, as you recently alluded to, just the West has no concept of
mhm,
what drives people to certain things in other parts of the world. And I don't think that unless we were in a similar situation, we would know to what extent we would go to for ourselves and our kids to survive. And so in working in that space, would sometimes just hear a lot of judgmental comments towards particularly the women who would allow their children to grow up in allow them to grow up in these environments,
mhm,
when truly that's not the case in any way, shape, or form. But what we work to do was to come alongside these women and provide them a resource that would keep their children safe when they were working. So
mhm,
we weren't in the quote unquote business of getting them out of the industry. We were wanting to give them something that I think in a lot of ways brings dignity to their motherhood. I remember when I was in Cambodia, I held hands with a woman who's a sex worker. And I remember her, she was, HIV positive, and, with tears rolling down her face, just told me, she's like, I just want to be a good mom, like we all do. Right. And
mhm.
I cry every time I tell this story because it's like that's what we want as women, is to be good moms.
Yeah.
And she wasn't feeling like she was able to do that because of the situation she found herself in. And so our program was able to provide, I would say, some level of dignity in that, hey, let's come alongside you and honor your desire to be a good mother and provide a service that your children need. And so what we would do is we would um, take their children at nighttime, and provide a safe space for them when they were working. That would allow them to do what they needed to do to raise money in the way that they knew how to do it, and in
Mhm.
a way that they could sustain themselves and their family, but would give their children a place where they would receive clean clothes, a bath. They would be given a meal, and just taken care of through the night.
Mm, wow. Whew. Wow. Yeah, I love the work that you're doing. I
Thank
love it.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing what you
Yeah,
do. And
absolutely.
yeah, and in some cultures it's hard because the
Mhm.
whole shaming thing
Yes.
and all of it, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think these women have been or still going through enough
Yeah,
and the judgment isn't needed.
100%.
They need someone to hold their hands to love them where they are, not where they
Mhm.
want to
Yep.
see them be. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. It's been so wonderful to hear even your story and what growing up in Haiti was like. And so thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
You're welcome. I have two questions for you as we wrap up. The first
Yeah.
one is, what is the meaning of life for you?
Oh, the meaning of life for me, that's a deep question.
Mm,
For me right now, it's being a good mom to my son.
mm,
He is my entire world.
mhm. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Last question. Where can my listeners find you and support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so angelcovers.org and healingwaters.org are the best places to find me.
Awesome. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all you do and keep up the
Yeah.
amazing work.
Thank you so much, Bernadette.
You're welcome.